Good morning. It is Wednesday, April the 6th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the daily declaration for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have no free lunch, and then the conclusion to the book, Shadowbosses. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 6th. You are redeemed from the curse through the power of my Son. You are my almighty warrior, and I have given you my armor that you may be able to be victorious over the enemy. Use my shield of faith, for with it you will be able to put out all the flaming darts that Satan will try to use against you. Be strong and courageous, for the enemy desires to destroy you altogether. When Leviathan stands before you with sparks of fire spewing from his mouth and smoke going out of nostrils like a boiling pot or a forest fire, you will have the power to utterly defeat him. You will be able to quench every burning light that he uses to try to inflict his destruction upon you. In the name of my Son Jesus, you will be able to rebuke every firebrand sent against your life. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 13 and verse 16. Job chapter 41, verses 20 through 21. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 4. Prayer declaration. In your power, Lord, I quench with the shield of faith every fiery dart the enemy sends my way. In the name of Jesus, I quench the darts of jealousy, envy, anger, bitterness, and rage sent against my life. I bind and cast out every fiery serpent set against me, and will not be burned by the fire of the enemy. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 6th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. And 10, means-tested health care. Thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back not-for-profit news. Number 2, destroy the cult of promiscuity. Replace with an emphasis on privacy. Number 3, destroy the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number 4, destroy the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number 5, destroy the cult of imagination, psychologists, and Hollywood. Number 6, destroy the cult of reinvention by admitting your mistakes. Thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number 1, they fail to consult their consciences. Number 2, they fail to listen to their own shows. Number 3, they aid and abet the left. Number 4, they demoralize their audiences. Number 5, they contradict themselves. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, profit is an inescapable category of human action. All action aims at profit. Any act I perform, from reading a book to digging a hole to blinking my eyes, implies an expectation to substitute a more satisfactory state of affairs for a less satisfactory state. Why else would I act? To criticize broadly the desire to profit is to misconceive the impetus to do anything at all whatsoever. But profit is in no way limited to material gain, nor to narrow self-interest. People are free to assume the interests of others as their own and to act on behalf of spiritual ideas. And yet neither case diminishes the expectation to gain from what one is doing. Unquote. Matthew Summers. The entire discussion of economics would be substantially improved if this basic concept was fully understood and allowed to replace the constant loaded refrain about profits. One may choose for either ignorant purposes or agendized ones to financialize our understanding of profits, but if we understand human action, we understand profits in the fully economic sense. The behavioral, the psychological, the charitable, the altruistic, the drive for self-advancement, altogether the cause of the human spirit. And that was, there's no free lunch. Thank you, thank you. And now, the conclusion of the book, Shadowbosses. Consider our version of Aesop's fables of the three tradesmen. It once happened that a large walled city came under attack from raiders. The inhabitants came to a public meeting to decide how best to defend their city from invasion. At the meeting, the head of the bricklayers' union stood up. "Bricks," he thundered, "they're the best way to defend against invasion. Build walls full of them, and it won't cost you too much." "No, no," interjected the head of the Carpenters' Guild. "Timber, sharpened to points, makes an excellent defense, and wood is even cheaper and stronger than bricks." "I beg to differ," the head of the Leathermen's Local cried to the crowd. "Leather will provide the best resistance for our city, far better than sticks or bricks." Leather obviously wouldn't do much to protect the city from attack, but that didn't stop the leather tradesman from making his pitch. This fable has been used for thousands of years to teach children a simple truth. Every man is out for his own trade, even when their city's future rests in the balance. And America's future certainly does rest in the balance. But unlike the walled city in our fable, our celebrated city on a hill is threatened from within. America is under attack. Our nation's finances are ruinous. We face out-of-control government spending and deficits. Our states are going bankrupt. And instead of working on defending us against these calamities, our government is making the problem worse by following the advice of tradesmen out for their own trades. Our government keeps buying government union bricks, hand over fist. It purchases and stockpiles government union wood, and our government has signed a long-term contract with government union leather merchants. Yet our government is quickly running out of money and borrows from foreign nations to pay its bills. Meanwhile, our undefended city walls are weak and starting to crumble. When outside forces come to threaten us again, we will no longer have the resources to mount an adequate defense to save our people, and our very American way of life will be threatened. The biggest issues of our time are tied up with the growth of government employee unions and the resulting growth of government. When people talk about America borrowing more than it can pay back, the growth of government is the cause. When people warn us that America is becoming reliant on foreign lenders like China and oil-rich Arab states, excessive government spending is really to blame. When people worry about our states and municipalities nearing insolvency, government employee unions are again at the root. Government employee unions and politicians have been working on growing our government for decades. The growth of our government may be in the union's interest, but it endangers us as a nation. Growing government hurts all the taxpayers, the people who make our nation's pie. The losers include private sector union members who are also pie makers and don't share the same interests in growing our government as government employee union members. Government employee unions dug us a deep hole, threw us in, and pushed back down when we tried to climb out. Now they're handing us a shovel and tell us to dig deeper. Our government can no longer reform, streamline, and improve itself because government employee unions stand in the way. From our schools to our skies, government employee unions hold our nation back from all the greatness that we could achieve and drag our nation closer and closer to the abyss. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. The end of common sense in America. For far too long, Americans have been blind and deaf to the threat of government employee unions. The level of control that these shadow bosses now exert over the lives of everyday Americans is increasing and approaching the absurd. Just ask 86-year-old Pennsylvania volunteer crossing guard Warren Eschenbach. When a nearby school built an area for parents to pick up their children from school near his house, Eschenbach tried to be a good citizen, volunteered to control traffic. He had retired a few years before from a crossing guard position at another school and wanted to protect the school children in his own neighborhood. But then a local union representative for AFSCME heard about this helpful citizen. AFSCME then insisted that Eschenbach be canned from a volunteer position because he was undermining the union and that he be replaced with a $12.65 an hour unionized dues-paying crossing guard. The elementary school principal couldn't believe it. Here we have a community member who's giving back to the community and offering something to the children to keep them safe, and so I just view it as a good thing, and I'm not sure why someone would find fault with that, but obviously somebody has. Somebody did, a government employee union official, and when the city denied the union's formal grievance, the union threatened to take the case to arbitration. Of course, unions would find fault with Eschenbach. He's showing that there are people who are willing to actually work for free for the good of their community, to volunteer. And we don't mean volunteer in the union sense of the word, as in getting a stipend meal and a t-shirt for volunteering at a get-out-the-vote phone bank for a few hours. The Manhattan Institute City Journal recently broke a story about how parents volunteering in their children's schools to help the library or answer phones were being challenged by the teachers' unions, who claimed that the parents were taking jobs that should have been performed by union workers. In America today, it starts to seem almost logical to ask, why should parents be able to volunteer at their kids' schools when we can hire dues-paying union members to do the work instead? Or ask 17-year-old Eagle Scout Kevin Anderson, also of Pennsylvania. This hardworking teenager voluntarily cleared a walking trail in his local park, not realizing that the local SEIU affiliate would threaten to file a grievance against him for doing work that could have been done by a dues-paying union member. Only after the story broke nationwide did the SEIU back down. These crazy stories aren't the exception. They're becoming the rule in America today, and unless we fight back, government employee unions will bankrupt our country morally and financially and destroy our nation's future. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Future in the balance. Our future does hang in the balance, and still the government employee unions press for every advantage, ignoring the looming fact that the walls will soon come tumbling down upon us. The lasting legacy of our government employee unions is the corruption of our political system. Once unions shifted to representing government employees, they became intensely political because their growth depended on the largesse of government. As we have seen, these unions use money and manpower to elect government officials. These government officials pass legislation enshrining pro-union measures and negotiate favorable contracts with the unions that helped elect them. The unions then earn more forced dues income as a result, which they redeploy to re-elect pro-union politicians. It is a perfect cycle of corruption because the only people in a position to end the cycle actually get a piece of the graft and don't want to stop the flow of free money. We must always keep in mind that government employee unions are private entities. Their business is maximizing dues income. Generating more benefits for the workers already in the union is a secondary priority. That means that they won't make deals allowing the government to reward better workers. They won't make deals that benefit their members if it means that the unions make less cash. The union's interests always come first. The workers' interests come second, and the taxpayers' interests come a distant last place. The shadow bosses need taxpayers for one important thing. Our tax dollars pay for our ever-expanding government. The government employee unions create no wealth. They merely feed from the public trough. Although government jobs seem to be where it's at in America today, we can't all go to work for the government. If we do, our nation will be a lot like the former Soviet Union. Everybody will have a job, but nobody will have a potato. Many government employees make more than the private sector workers. They get better benefits, they get better retirement packages. While it's great to be a government employee these days, at least in comparison to private sector workers, government employee union bosses have taken important rights away from government employees too. Few workers ever had the opportunity to vote for or against their union. It was just there when they got there, and will likely be there forever, thanks to laws favoring the establishment of unions. And once workers are represented by a union, the workers lose their right to sell their own labor and to petition their government employer on their behalf. Union bosses trade top jobs among themselves and take the cream off the top, and they do it on the backs of America's workers, who are often denied a real voice in union governance. These same workers have to pay substantial union dues, generally without their consent. Taxation without representation was the rallying cry of the American revolutionaries. Today, union members should think about beginning their revolution to reclaim their right to control their own labor, to be free from coercive forced dues obligations, and to speak with their own voice. Back in a minute. Thank you. Looming dangers. Not only do we pay for these unions, we also have to worry about what happens when they strike. We've seen that making strikes illegal for critical public safety workers doesn't mean that strikes don't happen. According to one union boss, it just means that the strikes will be more effective because illegal strikes are more alarming to ordinary citizens. And government employee strikes are far more dangerous than private sector strikes. Surely, if the functions of government are too vital to be transferred to the private sector, they're too important to be handed over to the Shadowbosses. Police unions have gone on strike and allowed crime to go unpoliced. Firefighter unions have gone on strike and committed arson in order to make their point. Tacit acceptance of union violence isn't just for old-time private sector union thugs like Jimmy Hoffa. It's for government employee union bosses like James Hoffa Jr. And unbelievably, the Supreme Court itself has all but declared that kneecapping can be legal if in the pursuit of a legitimate union interest. Apparently, your right to swing your fist doesn't end where my nose begins, at least not if you've got your union card in your fist. The possibility of unions striking led even FDR to denounce the notion of government employee unions, but it didn't stop his ideological heirs from expanding unionism into the government sector. FDR knew that the union support was crucial to his election efforts. His political heirs knew that government employee union support could pave a path to permanent majority status for Democrats. Government employee unions know what a fantastic deal they have, and so they spend vast sums of money to keep pro-union politicians in power. These unions create massive political organizations that work hand in glove with the vast left-wing conspiracy, sometimes called the Shadow Democrat Party. This process resulted in 2008 in the election of the union's ally, Barack Obama, a man with deep experience with the SEIU, AFSCME, and the rest of the government employee union movement, but no experience with the challenges of business or actually making the pie. He promptly signed a stimulus bill that handed out millions in grants to his union supporters. He rammed through Obamacare, which renders millions more healthcare workers ripe for unionization, all while issuing waivers for union members so they could keep their own insurance plans. He sanctioned unionizing national security workers, he appointed union officials to the National Labor Relations Board, and much more. And he's not done yet. The re-election of President Obama may be the greatest victory in American history for the shadow bosses. If the first term was a disaster for the American taxpayer, a second term may push America over the edge. Our children, who are our nation's future, are literally playing the lottery to determine whether they will receive a decent education. The teachers' unions are keeping our school system disastrously bad because the current system works fine for the unions. The teachers' unions won't allow bad teachers to be fired. The teachers' unions insist on arbitrary standards for pay, like years at the desk and degrees achieved, and won't allow teachers to be paid for merit and performance. Worst of all, the teachers' unions indoctrinate our students with a leftist agenda, creating new unionists in the process. Greater unionization leads to greater decline. The stats bear this out. The states that have the most heavily unionized government workforce are the states most in debt. These states also have the highest tax burden. Meanwhile, these states are losing the capacity to fix themselves thanks to union contracts that include arbitration clauses, making political disputes into legal ones and letting arbitrators rather than legislatures decide whether taxes ought to be raised. For all these reasons, taxpayers are fleeing the union states and running to the free states, reshaping the demographic map of the country, but the unions are powerful in the free states too, and we will all pay the price when the union states go belly up and the federal government bails them out. Make no mistake, the government employee unions have bigger plans still. They're already pushing into new areas, achieving forced unionization of people who are paid through government programs, but who don't even work for the government, like care providers. By extension, if you receive government funds in connection with your work, you may soon find that a union can be appointed to represent you. And if government employee unions are able to expand their model to Social Security recipients, veterans welfare recipients, and other people who receive government benefits, these unions will lobby for increases to social spending and entitlement programs. And that will pretty much be the end of America as we know it. We're not there yet, but we're close. Join the fight. Back in a minute. Thank you. Join the fight. There's good news, however. America is fighting back. The battle has begun in states across our nation where good politicians have decided to stop letting union bosses hold the future hostage. But the government employee unions won't go down without a fight. In Ohio, unions were able to roll back a major pro-taxpayer bill. In Wisconsin, unions pushed for the recall of Governor Scott Walker to punish him for reforming collective bargaining of government workers in that state, but lost the recall election. But in Michigan and Indiana, unions have encountered big setbacks and lost their power to forcibly collect dues there. In 2012, Michigan and Indiana became our nation's newest right-to-work states, returning to workers their right to decide whether or not to support a union financially. This is the great battle of our time. It is a battle for the heart and soul of our country. It is not merely a question of fiscal responsibility. It's a question of freedom. Will taxpayers have the freedom to control their own political process, or will the shadow bosses usurp that power? Will workers control their own labor, or will they be forced to give away their rights simply in order to work? How will we fight the next government employee union power grab when unions try to continue to expand their power over our nation's workers? What will happen when there are not enough hardworking Americans willing to keep making pie and just too many pie eaters? Government employee unions are a threat not only to our economy, but to our fundamental American way of life. Our respect for workers' freedoms, our right to petition our government, our right and fair elections, our free and fair elections, and at the very heart of the matter, our democracy. In 1981, the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization proclaimed a strike against the government, hoping for a huge increase in pay and a 32-hour work week. President Ronald Reagan responded, "Let me make one thing plain. I respect the right of workers in the private sector to strike. Indeed, as president of my own union, I led the first strike ever called by that union. I guess I'm maybe the first one to ever hold this office who is a lifetime member of an AFL-CIO union. But we cannot compare labor management relations in the private sector with government. Government cannot close down the assembly line. It has to provide without interruption the protective services which are government's reasons for being." President Reagan fired the striking workers, over 11,300 of them. Replacement workers were found, and American air travel went on uninterrupted. The Air Traffic Controllers Union was disbanded, only to be formed again a few years later. But today, we must all remember the words and actions of President Reagan. The shadow bosses must be toppled. Now is the time. Let's get started. And that was the conclusion of the book Shadowbosses. Let me see here if I can get the full. Shadowbosses, Government Unions Control America and Rob Taxpayers Blind. And that's by Mallory Factor. And you can get it on Kindle. Excellent book. I highly recommend it. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you, thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to tune in to the John and Ken Show, which is an excellent example of how true conservatives communicate. It's a radio show that's on KFI AM 640 from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And that's Pacific time. So that's an excellent show to listen to. And other than that, until next time, remember to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.